up, Facebook Live family and friends? Elliot Andre, the head therapist here, is with Connected Roots. I got a great interview scheduled for us today with Charlie Goldberg, my boy.
What up?
What up, man? It's been a long time coming, and we've known each other for almost 8 years now. We've never done a live, so
that's crazy, man. It's about time.
Let's get it going. Please, yeah, Charlie, please, if you could introduce yourself, let everybody know who you are and what separates you from the pack in the world of psychotherapy, that'd be wonderful.
Absolutely. So my name is Charles Goldberg, otherwise known by my rap name as Hard Charlie. Yes, I'm a clinical psychotherapist who specializes in addictions. But to ensure my mom is proud of me, I'm also a professional rapper. You know, good Jewish boy, you got to be a professional rapper. It's like doctor, lawyer, accountant, rapper. You know, like these are only options. You know, what can I tell you? So I do that. I've been doing public speaking engagements all around the world for the last 5 years. I've spoken in 40 cities. That's been a lot of fun. And now for the last 6 months, I have a private practice here in the holy city of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Nice. And not only that, I also am really into, if you haven't noticed, I really like Jewish mysticism and Kabbalah, and I try to incorporate a lot of those traditions into the work that I do.
Nice. Thank you.
So, good stuff, man.
I think you introduced yourself wonderfully in that regard.
I try my best, man. I learn from the best.
There you go. Great. I love that you bring some sort of Jewish mysticism into your work. You know, I've never interviewed anybody who does that. So if we could, let's break down and really just let our audience know out there what that looks like with working with clients, how that's influenced you and your work, and how you really got started in incorporating that into your practice. That'd be a great start.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the first thing is, let's be honest. I didn't learn anything in graduate school. Okay, it's ridiculous. At the end of the day, you know, I have this amazing way of doing therapy. Hold on to your seats for this one. Things that work, let's do. Things that don't work, let's not do. Right? Unbelievable. So what I recognize is that, especially within spirituality, there has been doctrine that's sustained humanity and guided humanity for thousands of years. And, it's still, these are the oldest books in the world. People die to keep these books and these teachings alive. And I was like, well, if so many people have sacrificed to kind of uphold these traditions, there's probably something to them. And so as I kind of delved into them a little bit more deeply, talking about Buddhism, I learned a little Sufism, but I really got into Kabbalah just because it's Jewish and it's accessible and it's just something that makes sense. And I got blown away because it basically holds the answers to everything that everyone's looking for in this modern day. I told you, and please cut me off and ask questions because I won't stop talking. But the thing is that when I was in graduate school, it's not even just graduate school. Graduate school is a great time to lose your soul, right? And I always, right, it literally is a soul-sucking experience. And so for me, I really wanted to find something that made the challenge worth it. And one of the first teachings that really just resonated with me. So there's a beautiful question that's asked in different Kabbalistic works. And it's kind of like this. So if we believe in a God that's infinite, as human beings, it's hard to kind of comprehend what infinity actually looks like. But if we believe in a God that's truly infinite, meaning takes up all time, all space, how could it be that anything finite actually exists? Deep question, right? Because we know even Newton says in his laws, if there is something occupying this space, there's my fist. Hold on, I'm trying to get in camera. So whatever is in the space that my fist is occupying, nothing else could occupy this space, just my fist. And even if my fist isn't there, the air molecules, stuff like that, I could shift it away, but ultimately that space is filled. So the question is, how could it be that if God takes up all time and all space, how could it be that anything exists outside of God? So the Kabbalists give a magnificent answer. And they say that in order for the world to be created, God had to contract himself. He had to pull himself back to make a space for the world to exist. Now, let's kind of break this down, okay? How does a contraction feel? Is that a state of comfort for human beings?
A contraction?
Yeah. No. Typically not so much, okay? When a woman is having contractions before she's giving birth, it is excruciatingly painful. And if you think about this, how the world was created through discomfort. Mm-hmm. So this is like an unbelievably profound thing, because we're always talking about how these horrible things are happening to human beings. There's so much just darkness in the world. Like, why does it even need to be there? There are so many people who are like, yeah, God, well, you know what? Let's even from a Jewish perspective, like, how could God allow a Holocaust to happen?
Right.
You know, like, how could God allow all this stuff? And the first teaching that we have to know is that the greatest growth happens from discomfort. In order for the world to be created, there had to be a certain level of discomfort. And I absolutely love this. You know, I always ask my clients this question. Maybe, you know, this will be a fun thing for us to participate in. So, Elliot, I'm gonna ask you this.
Sure.
What is the most important lesson? And it doesn't need to necessarily be the most important. Let's say top 3. What is one of the most important lessons you've ever learned over the course of your life?
Oof.
Deep question.
I think the most important lesson I probably learned in the last 5 to 10 years has been how to be empathetic.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Mine is actually in a very similar route. Like, you know, I was taught that if you want to get people to change, which is ultimately the only thing we're doing as therapists, we're helping people change. If you want to get a person to change, the best way to go about doing that is with kindness and with love.
Sure.
Now, there's a follow-up question to the first question. So the first question, remember, is how, you know, what's the most important lesson you ever learned? But the follow-up question, and this one you don't have to answer, is how did you learn that lesson? Now, I'll tell you something very interesting. I've asked these 2 questions to probably over 1,000 people. And one answer that I never receive is, oh, well, you know, I was sitting on a beach in Tahiti sipping a Mai Tai and suddenly I had an epiphany. Okay,
Right.
Like, no one says that. Whenever we learn these important lessons in life, it comes through a tremendous struggle, something that was unbelievably painful, that pushed us to our core, that, you know, hurt us deeply, but somehow we found a way through. And as a result of that, it makes us a stronger, better person. And I mean, if you think about it, I think right now, obviously, the hot topic is the coronavirus. I mean, it's so interesting how, yes, we are surrounded by death, and things are only getting worse. Let's not even sugarcoat it. But at the same time, you know, there are a lot of very religious Jews who believe that all this suffering and all of this heartbreak and this hardship is actually a sign of the Messiah coming. Wow. And we're not talking like end of days type stuff. You know, one thing that Judaism prides itself on is always being very positive. So how could there be such positive in such dark times? And actually, what's really beautiful about this, if you think about it, and this is incredible, the world has never been as united as it is right now. In human history, there has never been a time period where so many people are united. We're all fighting the same enemy, and this enemy doesn't discriminate. So everyone is against it. Everyone is united. Everyone wants to join together. And that unification is really what it means to be a human being. Ultimately, and this is kind of what we'll get into in a little bit, I really think that part of our existence is being able to recognize that really we're one with everything. Meaning, you know, humanity, creation, God, like every human being has a piece of God within him or her, you know? And so the question is, do we actually recognize this? And so the beautiful concept, so coming back to our original statement from Kabbalah, is that like the world was born from discomfort. Now, what's really interesting, and this is where, you know, the Kabbalists begin explaining creation and going in depth with it. How the story goes is that after this contraction took place, it's called a tzimtzum, this contraction, there was this empty space within which God was able to create the world. And what was created first? What's like the beautiful transition between, you know, completely spiritual and completely physical? There was first light, right? Let there be light. Click, turn the switch.
It's on.
So it's on. It's on. And the thing is that, you know, if you see color, I mean, one thing that I really appreciate you are super duper colorful, my friend. Seriously, rocking the cat shirt like a gangster. Yes, that's so awesome. So, you know, if you think about it, the only reason why we see color is because light is reflecting off of it, right? Light without something to reflect off of isn't really light. So there had to be, it's not enough for light just to be created. There has to be something to reflect it. So what the Kabbalists explain is that God took 10 attributes that he uses to interact with the world and used them to make these spiritual vessels to collect the light. We're starting to get kind of woo-woo, okay? And I promise you this is going to start making sense real soon. But we first got to get real woo-woo before we start. Yeah, exactly. We first get real woo-woo before we're going to start making sense.
For sure.
So there are these 10 vessels that God kind of created, and they're spiritual vessels. We're not talking like physical things, to reflect and catch his light. Problem is that God made these vessels disconnected. And as a result of that disconnection, they became egotistical, as the story goes. And so they, like for instance, God's kindness was like, yo, I'm way better than you, ability to overcome internal obstacles. And they got so egotistical that actually these vessels exploded.
Shit.
And so now we have this empty space with a bunch of broken vessels, and God is like, oh boy, I need to create something a little bit more physical to catch these vessels. And God creates the earth. So the earth was created with brokenness, basically. So this, again, paints this picture of discomfort, of brokenness. This is what is needed for creation to happen. If we want to make a new world, remember, people come to therapy. There are 7.5 billion people in the world. If you're going to come to see a therapist, you are doing so for one reason and one reason only. You have a change to make. So
for sure.
So the idea is, though, that change always requires something to break. Your old ways, your old methods, your old patterns, something's got to break, and it never feels good. It never feels good. Ultimately, when a child is born, there has to be a severing from the mother. That umbilical cord has to be cut. And no kid is a fan of that, because to be honest with you, it's much nicer to just like chill inside this like warm protective cocoon. It's very scary to go out there into the world, but if we want to continue growing, if we want to continue living, that's what we have to do as human beings. So what ends up happening is now God creates another set of these 10 vessels, and he puts them within the world, but also recognizes, hey, I need someone to fix these vessels, but the vessels are now too physical for me to like really have a deep connection to. So God creates a human being.
Oh, I thought you were going to say he creates therapists.
And he creates therapists, right? On the 8th day, therapists were created. So that's exactly right. So what ends up happening is God creates these beings, these human beings that are half physical. So we have our physical aspects, we have our physical drives, we have to eat, drink, sleep, have sex, but we're also spiritual, and we're able to make lasting change and create in this world. One of the things that define humanity from all other species is that we can make lasting structures. You don't see any ancient beaver dams in existence. Our structures, though, can withstand the test of time. We are able to be creative. So that's also kind of where I tie in my rap identity, is that I really believe that one of the greatest ways we can be spiritual people and serve our creator is to emulate him, to be creative, right?
Yeah, creativity, a huge part of anything I always offer to clients in terms of what's helpful. Creative expression with anything, arts, music.
Absolutely.
Running, jogging, who knows? Just any way to express themselves, absolutely.
Exactly. But that's the thing. And what makes that creative expression so meaningful and so powerful? It's the power of communication. If you think about it, like being a rapper, being a therapist, they seem to be polar opposites. They're not at all. They're one and the same, because ultimately you're trying to make an impact with people's words. Right. We tell our children a horrible lie when they're born. We say, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. I cannot say how far from the truth that is. In fact, I think every single person could think of at least one thing that someone has said that just kills them on the inside to this very day. And, it's so interesting because, Freud developed this entire notion of the speaking cure. One of the things that Kabbalah explains that I think is really magnificent, and also leads to like my first song. It's called The Rock. You should check it out, hardcharlie.com. I know it's shameless self-promotion. But
that's over here, man.
Yeah, boom. One of the things that's really amazing is Hasidus, so Jewish mysticism, explains that there are 4 levels of creation. The lowest level is something called domem, the inanimate, and then you have the vegetative, you have the animate, which is where all animals are, and then you have human beings. And what's the defining factor of human beings? Not only being creative, but how are they creative? They speak. Speaking is the ultimate creative ability.
True.
And if you think about this, like we can cure people just by getting them to speak. If you think about this, like how people get better is when they actually communicate. Now, there are a lot of Buddhists who might take, issue with this because, they're all into vows of silence and things like that. But that runs very antithetical to Jewish thinking. What Jewish thinking says is, as a human being, your essence is to be a speaker. And so too, we see so frequently, why is it that people love coming to therapy? Because it's a place where you can speak
freely
and not face
and not be judged for your communication. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So all of this, and that's the thing that's so crazy, is like we know all this stuff, but like it's been around in these Kabbalistic teachings for thousands of years.
Right.
And maybe it's taken on new clothes here and there, but like, this is part of what has sustained humanity for ages. So
Absolutely.
Anyway, one of the things that was really interesting, we were talking about these 10 attributes. So as human beings, in order for us to be able to recognize these attributes in the world, and not only that, but remember, we were also charged with the task of fixing the broken vessels. Maybe you've heard of this term in Judaism called tikkun olam.
Yeah. I don't remember what it means, but I've heard of it.
Okay, so tikkun olam literally translates to healing the world. For many Jews, what that looks like is like planting trees and giving tzedakah, all noble acts. But really, this term has its origins in Kabbalah. And what that actually looks like is helping the world find balance. So let's talk about what that actually looks like, because there's some really cool stuff to kind of extract from these teachings. So first and foremost, as human beings, we are born with the same 10 attributes. All human beings have these same 10 attributes, and they're the same 10 attributes that God has. This is what it literally means to be created in God's image, is that we have the ability to interact with the world in the same way that he can. However, God's attributes are perfectly balanced at all times. Ours, however, are not. So for all my perfectionists listening, like, this is the thing. As human beings, we are born out of balance. That's what we are. That's who we are. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't aim to try to seek balance, but also we have to kind of come to recognize that perfection is for God, not for us. So I'm sure the $1 million question is right now that a lot of people are wondering, or what are these 10 attributes and what have they got to do with anything? So
are they incorporated into practice, in that regard?
Exactly. And so the thing is, and this is what's really cool, these 10 attributes, when you have an understanding of how they work and how they operate, you will see them in the world. What I like about these 10 attributes, which I think is really cool, everything that is related to numbers in Judaism has something to do with these 10 attributes.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So like here, I'll give you a cool example. So first and foremost, these attributes are broken down into the cognitive, into the emotional, and into the interpersonal. And actually, so it's 3, 3, and 3. So that's 9. And I said there were 10. So the lowest attribute is what we were saying earlier. The lowest attribute is something called kingship, malchut. And what that attribute is a person's ability to recognize that really they're one with everything. That me and you, there's no difference between us, that we share a common history. We share a common God. And really our souls are inextricably united.
Sense of common humanity in that regard.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, certain animals can do this to some extent, but there really isn't any other group of creatures that cares so deeply about like the global existence. Okay, like deer might care about their families, right? But I don't think that deer are worried about like deer in like South America or in Africa or things like that. There is this deep connected part of us, these connected roots that we seem to have as human beings, and so I don't know. I think that's very interesting. So that's our lowest attribute. Now, the top 3 So interestingly enough, Eric and I, or I'm sorry, Andrew and I met through this organization called Chabad. Do you want to tell everyone what Chabad is, like how you would like to?
Yeah, I mean, Chabad
Yeah.
is an organization run by Hasidic Jews that brings anybody and everybody together. It doesn't matter where you are in your religious belief, if you're black, if you're white, if you're Cuban, if you're Asian, anybody and everybody is welcome, no matter who you are and what you do. It's just about community and bringing people together.
And this is where we met. Everybody drinks that punch. I definitely think that Chabad has a very big impact on the world. And what's very interesting, do you know what Chabad means?
Mm-mm.
So Chabad is actually an acronym for the 3 cognitive attributes from Kabbalah.
Oh, wow.
So these 3 attributes, and here's the thing, you've heard before of this thing called DBT, right? Dialectical behavior therapy, or as my clients like to call it, diabolical behavior therapy.
Right.
I really like that. But let's talk about that for a second. So do me a favor, give us a really quick synopsis. How would you define DBT?
DBT are when there's two different dialecticals. Yep. Dialecticals, I can never remember the term.
Dialectic, whatever, yeah.
There are 2 things that happen that aren't supposed to go together, but do in some ways.
I'll tell you something really interesting. So we met under Eliyahu, right? Eliyahu Ben Chiyun was the Chabad rabbi in Lincoln Park, and we spent many dinners together and enjoyed ourselves. And what's actually very interesting is that Eliyahu's dad, Meir Chai, had a major influence on me, as did Eliyahu, of course, the whole Ben Chiyun family, really. But for me, one of the most amazing things that he said, and this is such a beautiful lesson that also is kind of reiterated in Kabbalah, is that the greatest achievement of mankind is the ability to bear opposites simultaneously.
Yes.
This is an unbelievable thing. Okay, it's mind-blowing. Okay, I told you I specialize in addiction, so I mean, I could honestly tell you that there are people who are addicts who lie and cheat and steal, who are actually amazing parents and amazing human beings, creme de la creme, my favorite people to spend time with. I could be a rapper psychotherapist. Okay, we're entitled to have these almost conflicting identities, but at the same time, the point is not to see the world as black and white.
Right.
Now, how DBT is kind of broken down is just like you were saying. You have a thesis, you have this point, you have its opposite, the antithesis, the antithesis, and then you have something that brings them together. You have this thing called the synthesis. And interestingly, these sfirot, these attributes, are laid out in the same way. So similarly, we have this thing called chokhmah, which is wisdom. Conversely, we have its opposite of bina, which is understanding. And then we have the thing that binds them together, which is knowledge. And let's actually kind of dive deep into these things because they have amazing lessons to teach us. This is super cool. Beautiful. Okay. So the first thing we have to do is kind of define what these things are. Okay. So first we have chokhmah. Chokhmah is your ability. Imagine this. Imagine you have just climbed a mountain, right? And you are standing on top of this mountain and you can just see everything. Oh, I love the acting out. Oh, yo, this is so great. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. Live action, climbing and Kabbalah acting. This is great. Yo, this is a new way to incorporate it. I love it. I love it. And so imagine you're on the top of this mountain and you yourself are this little point. You're this teeny tiny, insignificant, almost little point. But ultimately, there's just this gigantic view. You are seeing the big picture in its full glory, right? That is what chokhmah, that's what wisdom is. It's the ability to see the big picture from the perspective of a tiny point, okay? Conversely, what would the opposite of the ability to see the big picture be?
To see a very linear, kind of single-minded viewpoint.
Exactly, to see the tiny details. And the only way we could see the tiny details, instead of being that tiny point on the mountain, we have to have the bird's eye view. We got to be able to see the whole picture, right? Mm-hmm. So that's how we see the tiny details. So the tiny details are what the Kabbalists refer to as understanding, right? And that's also an important perspective to take. On the one hand, you need the big picture. On the other hand, you need the tiny perspective. And then lastly, we have this thing called knowledge. And knowledge is what's said to combine these two things. And what knowledge is not only your ability to kind of unify both the global picture as well as the smaller details, but it's the ability to actually internalize those things and act as a result of them. So I'll give you the famous metaphor that's always told. Okay, so imagine it's the 1950s, right? And there is a doctor who's outside having a cigarette. And someone comes up to this doctor and says, "Yo, doc, that's really not good for you." Okay? So immediately the doctor thinks, "What? Craziness." This one little question, or this one little statement, "cigarettes are not good for you," has given rise to 1,000 different questions. Well, what about them isn't good for you? How are they not good for you? How many of them do I need to smoke on a daily basis to not be good for you? Like, what do you mean it's not good for me? So the doctor begins to do research on these questions. He's going to start breaking the cigarette down into tiny parts and figuring out what about this whole process of smoking is unhealthy. That right there is very much the understanding, the Bina type thinking. It's the tiny details, it's the research he's doing. Now, this is where it gets interesting. When he accrues all of his data and he looks at the whole thing, he looks at the initial question, he looks at his data, but when he himself stops smoking, that's when it gets to the level of da'as, of knowledge, of internalizing it and changing behavior. So this is nice, and we use all three types of thinking on a daily basis without really noticing. But now this is where the Kabbalah stops and the Charles begin. Okay, so let me tell you my theory. Okay, and keep your hat on because this, I think, is kind of mind-blowing.
Okay. Here real quick. Here we go. So,
here we go. Oh man, we're hunkering down. So this is my theory. This is the thing that I think is really cool. Let's actually begin like this. What is the difference between anxiety and depression? I think there are two that are really popular, straightforward, and easy to kind of state. What would you believe are the differences between anxiety and depression?
It's a good question. I think that's one that clients are constantly asking, for sure. Depression, maybe more long-term, chronic, more debilitating, affects more parts of their lives. Anxiety, more short-term, kind of depending on the person, but maybe comes up, situationally or what have you.
Absolutely. Okay, so that could be a difference. The two that I'm thinking of are our root emotion. The root emotion of depression is sadness.
Totally.
The root emotion of anxiety is fear.
Yes.
And secondly, and this is the part that's also really cool, depression is always based in the past. Anxiety is always based in the future, right?
Yeah.
And this is the thing we that makes this whole thing very interesting. So one thing we have to know about wisdom, in its nature, wisdom always comes from the past. So the stuff that I'm sharing with you, this wisdom that I'm giving you, has existed long before either of us were alive, right? Wisdom is always something from the past. Even in Kabbalah, it explains that Chokhmah, which is wisdom, gains its energy from the level of Keter, which is the past, basically. Conversely, what's the opposite of the past is the future. Understanding is something that we always work towards. We arrive at an understanding. It is always something ahead of us, right? So we know that wisdom is in the past, understanding is in the future. This is where it gets interesting. What my theory is that the reason why mental health disorders arise within people is because of imbalances within their Kabbalistic attributes. And I think you could trace back almost every mental disorder to either a connection between two of these attributes or within the attribute itself. And here's the thing that's really cool about this whole thing, because I don't know about you, but when I was in graduate school, they taught a lot of conceptualization, meaning I'm very, very good at picking out people's problems, right? If a person comes to me with an issue, I could tell you 5 different theories as to why they're having an issue. But the issue with seeing the issues is they don't teach you intervention.
Right.
I really never learned how to be a therapist. This is why I'm so pissed off at graduate school. I never really learned how to be a therapist in graduate school. I could tell you 1,000,000 times over what's wrong with you, but how to fix it?
Right.
No one really teaches that. They say be validating. But if I have a person, who's coming to me and they're having a problem at work and I say, "Oh wow, that's really hard." They're going to be like, "Yeah, no shit, it's hard. Obviously it's hard."
Tell me what to do.
Yeah, like what should I do about it? And that's the thing. Like validation is important, but only to a point.
Right.
Okay, if you're shelling out money to speak to a therapist, hopefully that therapist is going to give you some form of guidance, some form of wisdom, something.
Yeah.
Okay, so and I'm glad we're on the same page with that, because there are some therapists who think I'm insane for saying this, and they're like, "No, you just have to be really person-centered." Blah 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 blah. I like telling my clients that they're full of shit. Okay, I don't know how therapeutic that is, but like it's an important thing. Okay,
well,
we need someone.
That full of shitness allows them to understand and recognize they need to make change.
Absolutely. Okay, and at the end of the day, and this is the important thing, they have to know that I love them. Definitely. That comes back to that earlier statement that I made. Most important thing is that, if you want a person to change, it's got to come from love. Okay. Yeah. When I tell a person that they're full of shit, it is coming from the purest, most sincere, loving part of my heart. Totally. This is very, very, very important. And so anyway, what ends up happening, and this is what's really cool, we could actually look at the imbalance in each one of these attributes in the wisdom, as well as in the understanding, and by the way, as well as in the knowledge as well. And we could get a really good understanding of 3 different disorders, and not only an understanding of them, not only a conceptualization of them, but we could also begin pointing our way towards a cure, towards how to actually do an intervention that's going to be effective for these conditions. And this is going to be really cool. Okay. So first and foremost, remember, wisdom is in the past. So I believe when wisdom falls out of balance, what that looks like is depression. When understanding, which is in the future, falls out of balance, what that looks like is anxiety. Right? Here's the thing that's really interesting. Da'as, meaning knowledge, which is in the present, it's our ability to internalize. When that falls out of balance, it's trauma. And if you think about it, trauma sits very beautifully between anxiety and depression. On the one hand, okay, you are going to be extremely stuck on what happened to you. It is going to resonate in your mind. You're not going to be able to incorporate it adequately into your current functioning and into your psyche. It's just going to pop up when you don't want it to. So there's the depressive aspect, which is stuck in the past, but also there's the future aspect, the hypervigilance, the fear that it could happen again.
Fair, yeah.
So it works very, very nicely. It's a really good conceptualization, but this is what takes the conceptualization to the next level. It's the ability to actually do something about it.
Put action.
So, an action. And so, did you ever listen to Modest Yahoo back in the day?
Yeah, a little bit here and there.
Okay, so he has that famous song, Chop 'em Down, right? From the forest itself comes the handle to the axe. So this first statement, from the forest itself comes the handle to the axe, is actually a statement that comes from Talmud. And Talmud is the Jewish oral law. So when Moses went up to Sinai, not only did he write down a whole bunch of stuff, but he also received an oral tradition as well that was taught to him, that he passed on and passed on and passed on, until finally, when the diaspora happened, when Jews kind of went out around the world, there was one guy, we call him Yehuda the Prince, Judah the Prince, who sat down and codified this oral tradition. And in the oral tradition, it says again, from the forest itself comes the handle to the axe. And this is a great line to know in any helping profession. Because essentially what it says, the forest, the obstacle, can always be taken down by the axe, something that comes from the obstacle, which in essence means from the problem lies the solution.
Definitely.
So like, for instance, when we go to see a physician, okay, what's the first thing they're going to do when we see them and we say, oh, my side is hurting me, or I have a cough, or I have a fever? They're going to hopefully, and especially in this day and age, hopefully they're going to do a test on us.
Right.
Okay. Hopefully they're going to do some type of diagnostic something to figure out actually what's wrong. Why is that important? Because if we don't know what's wrong, it's absolutely impossible to fix.
Right.
And by the way, this is where so many issues arise in mental health. There are so many people who get sad, who get depressed, who get anxious, and they have no way of enunciating that, of putting it into words. And as a result, they suffer tremendously.
Totally.
Right? Mm-hmm. So I think the first part in any like psychotherapeutic relationship is figuring out like what is actually wrong.
Yeah, like the layers of the onion.
Exactly. It's the layers of the onion. Like, what's actually going on here? What's happening nice down and deep? And when you have an understanding of what the problem is, you could begin fixing it. So let's start with depression. Okay, so what depression teaches us, remember, depression is stuck in the past. One of the problems with depression, what's the trademark sign of depression, is hopelessness. What's hopelessness? It's the inability to see the future.
Fair.
So with that in mind, wouldn't it make sense that if we actually show the depressed person a future, they should get better?
You would think, yeah.
That works. So in essence, I like to call this, it's a two-step process, okay? So if a person's stuck in the past, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring them to the present moment. And we're going to say, dude, all that stuff that happened to you way back when, it's done now. It's done, okay? It's now the only, and it's over. And to actually make peace with the fact it's done. And if it's not done, if it's still happening, what can we do about that? Right. There's a really beautiful story that's told about two Shomer Nagia Buddhist monks. I don't even know do you know what Shomer Nagia is? So Shomer Nagia is like, you don't touch people of the opposite sex in public, okay?
Right.
So the idea is there are these two Buddhist monks, right? And they're walking down the road back to their monastery. And again, they practice this whole, we don't touch people of the opposite sex. And they get to a river, and they see at the river, there's this older woman who is kind of walking back and forth. And she's like, I really need to cross this river. I need help. Can you please assist me? And so one of the monks, without like missing a beat, literally just like picks her up, puts her on his shoulders, and him and the other monk walk across the river. They cross the river. He puts the lady down and says to her, have a nice day. And the two monks continue. Now, here's the issue. These two monks, they were good friends. But after this whole incident, the other monk who wasn't carrying the lady started to be like very standoffish and was kind of avoiding him in public. What was that?
Like judgmental of the whole situation?
Super judgmental.
Yeah.
And finally, the monk who picked up the lady goes to him and is like, bro, what's wrong with you? Because that's how Buddhist monks speak. And
true.
Anyway, yeah. And so this monk turns to the other monk and says to him, I really can't believe you broke your vow and you touched that woman. You picked her up. And the monk who picked her up responds quite profoundly, I put that woman down weeks ago. I don't know why you still haven't.
Right.
Mic drop. And I love that. Thank God for the yarmulkes, of brains would just be exploding everywhere. I mean, like the beautiful thing to take away from this that's so powerful is that like it's very hard to put down what happened to us.
Right.
But ultimately, many times we are the ones keeping the past alive, even if it's hurting us to do so. So in that present moment, we've got to bring our patient stuck in the past to the present moment and say, that's all done. And if it's not done, how do we get it to stop so that it does become the past? But now there's a second part. We have to teach our clients to look to the future. That just because you've had horrible things happen to you, just because some awful things took place, just because you've made some serious mistakes, doesn't mean you can't author your future in a way that would make you wildly successful beyond your wildest dreams. Right? And a lot of my therapy with depressed clients is planning for the future. Like, you have so much to look forward to. There's such good things waiting for you to inspire them with a little bit of hope. And if you think about it, okay, even right now, we're all a little depressed over this coronavirus. Okay, it's really out of control. Think about how great the world is going to be, what life is actually going to look like once we're through this. The market is going to recover. I will tell you something. Every single person on the planet has had a day where they go to work and they're like, dude, I don't want to be here. I'm totally not in the mood. I don't want to do this. I guarantee you that our production is going to go up through the roof when people go back to work, because they're going to appreciate what it is to go to work every day and have a job. Like, people are going to work so hard. They're going to be so excited to go to work and to actually have an income. Like, it's going to be a wonderful, beautiful thing. Like, this is going to usher in a time of unity and connectedness and security and preparation that humanity has never seen before. We're finally going to be like prepared for the next horrible thing that happens to us. We are finally going to invest in these relationships and just understand how precious people are to us, the ones in our lives. I mean, dude, Elliot, you and I haven't spoken in ages, but like, it's so good to see you, man.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
I have such good memories. That, right?
Yeah, I mean, we really recognize what we've taken for granted, what we haven't, where to put our energies, what to be grateful for. I mean, all the above.
Absolutely. And the world, like the thing that's very encouraging to me and very inspiring to me, and the thing that's giving me hope is that this world is going to be so different after all this nonsense is over.
It will be.
After this whole thing, after we're able to hopefully contain it, after the numbers go down, when we bury our dead, when we take time to introspect and reflect and move forward, wow, it's going to be such a powerful time for humanity, and I'm really, really excited to see what that kind of brings in.
Me too.
So we've spoken about depression a little bit. Now let's kind of work from the opposite direction. Let's go to people who are stuck in the future. Let's talk anxiety for a second.
Totally.
Okay. So this is going to get kind of interesting. So anxiety, remember, we're freaking out about the future, something that hasn't even happened yet, right? And the first step, obviously, is it's a two-step process, okay? We're going to bring that person who has anxiety to the present. You've done this a million times in your life. Bro, what are you freaking out about? It hasn't even happened yet. Right? It's actually really interesting. One of my favorite ancient traditions to learn about, I'm really into Stoicism. And one of the practices of Stoicism is something called it's called something malorum. It's meditatio malorum. That's what it's called. It's like a Harry Potter spell. I love that. Meditatio malorum, which literally is Latin for you should meditate on death. Gotcha. Okay, and what that exercise actually looks like, and it's quite brilliant. You know, one of the worst parts of anxiety is we do something called catastrophizing, where our minds automatically take us to DEFCON 6, even when there's really nothing wrong, right? So what drives people crazy is not our minds going to DEFCON 6. It's the fact that we don't have control of our minds going to DEFCON 6.
Fair.
So what Meditatio Malorum says is actually one of the things you could do if you're really anxious is go to like the worst case scenario and actually come up with a realistic plan of how to deal with it.
Yeah. Put the facts.
You know, let's put the facts on the table. So like, and this is a horrible exercise. No one likes doing this, but like, think of the worst possible thing that could possibly happen to you. Okay. And with you remaining alive, because if we die, we don't have to deal with it. We're just after we're dead. Okay. So the worst possible thing happening to you that keeps you alive. And now actually let's construct a plan of how to deal with it.
Right.
And, you know, I'll give my example that I hate giving, but I'm going to do it anyway. You know, the worst thing that could possibly happen to me is if, God forbid, anything happens to my wife and kid.
Sure.
Okay. God forbid, God forbid, God forbid.
Right.
But my plan is if, God forbid, that ever happened, I know the first place I would be going is probably to a rabbinical school, because there I'm getting, like, there's no privacy whatsoever. I'm going to get a ton of support, just be surrounded by people in spirituality for like an extended period of time. And then after that, I'm probably just going to move to the most Jewish area that I could find, where again, there's just loads of support, and I'm going to find a way to push forward, you know?
Totally.
But I'll tell you something, that when I start freaking out, it's very nice for me to know, hey, brain, even though you're freaking out right now, I do have a plan. And I know that plan will work, because when I've been broken before in the past, that's been the thing that's helped me. And this is now what's leading to the second step. So remember, if we're stuck in the future, we've got to first go to the present, but then we have to go to the past. Totally. And we're going to do this first from a non-spiritual perspective, and then we're going to do this from a spiritual perspective. And that's how we'll kind of wrap up.
Perfect.
So from a non-spiritual perspective, Elliot, have you been through challenge before?
Oh, for sure, of course. Who hasn't? Okay.
And if you've been through challenge, did you utilize a specific set of skills to get yourself through that said challenge?
Definitely tried to, with the knowledge I have, yes.
Okay, and so do you still possess those same skills you used in the past to get through those challenges?
Definitely.
Okay, so if you know you have those skills, what's there to worry about?
Right.
You have the skills to deal with any challenge that's going to befall you. I actually love saying to people, and this is actually quite brilliant. So I told you I work with addicts. So one of the things that we're really big on is the serenity prayer. It's God, please grant me to the serenity to be able to accept the things I cannot change, the wisdom or the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? If we file everything in our lives into I can control this versus I cannot control this, you can cure any amount of anxiety. Let's explain why. Because if I know I have control over something, what do I have to be worried over? I can control the outcome of it. Okay? So no anxiety. If I can't control something. I know I can't control something. What should I be worried over? I can't control it.
Right.
So ultimately, there's no reason to be worried, okay? But this is the last point. And now, let's talk. So we spoke about our own skills, right? We have skills that we've gained over the course of our lives, and we found ways to adapt to any challenge that's befallen us. And those same skills are not going anywhere. You still possess those things, okay? Mm-hmm. But now we have to go a little deeper. And this is what's a little bit difficult for certain people to do, and that's perfectly fine. But if we believe in God, okay, God did not turn his back on us when we went through those challenges. Right. I'm going to drop a crazy thought on a lot of people, that actually God loves us. Okay, the God in Judaism is literally nothing but love. We don't have this God that strikes us with lightning bolts and smites us, right? Everything that God does for us comes from a place of love.
Definitely.
That is a crazy thing to say. God loves me so much that he put my family through a Holocaust. Are you kidding me?
Right.
What do you mean he loves me? Okay, no, God does love us, because you have to understand, God is, just like how we began, infinite. As human beings, we can't wrap our minds around infinity. So God has a plan that we can't understand. Remember, above the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, there is this God. Mm-hmm. And so, it's very interesting where cognition stops, where our thinking stops, when we don't know, that's when faith begins.
Definitely.
And, one of the things that I love is that God loves us so much. How much does he love us? He woke us up today.
Sure.
God woke us up today and says, look, you've really screwed up. Like, Charles, oh my God, dude, you've got a man bun. Like, what are you doing wrong in your life? Okay, like, seriously, you're such a weird guy. Like, you're screwing up. What is with you? This is so horrible. God knows what you're telling other people.
Right.
Okay, but nevertheless, God woke me up today.
Totally.
Why did God wake me up? God woke me up because he recognized I have something to do today. I have something meaningful to do today. There's a beautiful teaching by Rabbi Nachman of Breslov that says the only reason why a person is born into this world is because God senses a deficiency in existence, meaning out of all the 7.5 billion other people currently alive, there's some dynamic, there's some deficiency that's gone unaddressed, and hence another person needs to come into this existence. And so that means that everyone from the homeless bum on the street to the Wall Street millionaire is equally important in the eyes of God. And that's something unbelievably profound. Like, we are all so precious. Like, it's important that we recognize that when we are staying home, even if it means that we're helping a stranger, that stranger's life matters just as much as yours does. And that's the big thing. Every single life is precious. Every single life is precious. And God loves us. God believes in us. The only reason why God sends us challenges is because he loves us so much, because he wants us to learn those deepest lessons that we could possibly learn, and to have that incredible wisdom to push us forward so that we can truly become the people that he knows we're capable of being. And, there's a famous rabbi in Kansas City who says, it really doesn't matter whether or not you believe in God. What matters is that you recognize God believes in you.
Definitely.
That at the end of the day, like, you woke up this morning. Someone, something out there believed in you enough that you could continue making a huge impact on this world. So with that being said, dude, seriously, I hope this was meaningful to you and to everyone who was listening. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Hell yeah.
And I admire so much what you're doing, man.
Absolutely. Appreciate you. Why don't you give us something, some rhythm, some rhyme, some words.
Oh, man.
Before we call out and start the day over here. Let's hear it.
Absolutely. It goes like this. God bless you. You ain't even gotta sneeze. Positive change, compliments, promises, and apologies. Demons dissolve upon acknowledging. No need to withdraw and leave. If you accept your flaws and see your thoughts as send it subject to falsity. Take solace to droplets all the harder processing. The pain of trauma tamed from calmly unlocking the box and commenting. The liquor bottle embodies hypocrisy. Misled to believe a relief or monotony, but never receive despondency. Own the possibilities like apostrophes. Insert a comma to diminish velocity. When we're strong enough to honor darker periods properly, the light could be admired, shining in its most authentic quality. Have we all forgotten to stop and breathe because we're constantly bombarded by a barrage of electronic screens? Tries to fix our lives via shopping sprees and gossiping about frivolity. societies of fate demolishing. Please don't lock up your beauty inside the armor you model unconsciously, because the nuances you disguise are what make you a novelty. Enough admonishing. Confidence blossoms from rigorous honesty. Return to yourself. Recovery is yours as long as you want it. Right?
Wonderful. My
Therapy
God.
on the mic, yo.
Where can we hear that shit again?
Absolutely. It's hardcharlie.com. Just check it out. It's a song called Recovery.
Awesome. Love it.
So, yo, thank you so much for having me.
My friend, such a wonderful conversation.
Seriously, it's so good catching up to you. God bless you and your family. I miss you guys a lot.
Really appreciate you. The Head Therapist is out. Catch you all later. See you soon.
Take care.
Peace.